Moscowitz, Monday through Friday, 12 noon to 1 p.m. and beyond Eastern Standard Time. And of course, we are taking calls on this program now. It's amazing what I can do with this thing. It's 617-396-4958 is the number. 617-396-4958. My guest this segment is Kenny Sue. He is the author of the new book, An Inconvenient Minority, The Attack on Asian American Excellence and the Fight for Meritocracy. He is the president of Color Us United, which advocates for a colorblind society. Kenny, thanks for joining me this afternoon.
Thanks, Charles. Appreciate it.
So your book seems to be addressing this issue that is, of course, going on in my neck of the woods, that being Boston and Cambridge, in that Harvard University is being sued for discriminating against Asian applicants. And in the course of that lawsuit, some pretty unpleasant and might I even suggest racist things have come out regarding internal memoirs in Harvard in their description of Asian applicants. What do you make of that, and what do you see going on with that at this point?
What do I make of it? Well, the evidence is overwhelming. So you can make of it whatever you want, but the objective evidence is overwhelming because according to Harvard's own studies, if Asians weren't discriminated against in Harvard, they would make up about 43% of the student body. This was a 2013 Harvard Office of Institutional Research study conducted by Harvard itself. Instead, they make up about 18%. And an Asian American has to score 440 points higher on the SAT to have the same chance of admission as a Black person. And Harvard, in order to do this, rates Asians lowest on the personality score. They grade people on academics, extracurriculars, and personality. So all of this combines to make a compelling case for discrimination against Asian Americans. And if you analyze the 90,000 pages of admissions data, you can see that that's backed up.
Well, I would think that if they're going to rate people based on those three criteria, they would do just that, rate individuals based on those three criteria, rather than get into people's ethnic backgrounds and then put people into these collective categories, which are really not true and which are, they don't necessarily dictate who someone is. So, on the face value of that, it seems quite discriminatory that they would do that, that they would put people in those kind of baskets, as it were.
Of course, it's discriminatory. I mean, this is the definition of discrimination. When you're holding somebody who's a part of a certain group to a higher standard than another. The reason why liberals justify this, why Harvard justifies this, because they say, well, we want a diverse student body. And of course, diverse to them means not too many Asians, please, because they want a student body that looks good, right? And of course, Asians to them don't look good enough. There are too many of them. They're an invasive species in their eyes, in their mind. And they should be artificially suppressed from Harvard admissions. Now, of course, I disagree with that because if you're looking for diversity, why are you looking for diversity in race? What does race have to say about your temperament, your character, your excellence? You should be looking, if you really want a truly diverse quality people, you should be looking at the objective metrics, and you should be saying, well, we want people who fit. Who have different interests, right? But you shouldn't rely on race to determine that.
Absolutely. And I think also, as a matter of statistics, if Harvard got rid of those sort of racial categories and they did just look at the three categories you mentioned across the board equally to applicants, then probably the college would not be 45% Asian anyways, because, the same thing happened in a way in the California college system when they got rid of quotas after a lawsuit. And they said, well, we'll no longer have Black students. But that didn't turn out to be true at all. Because when you do judge people based not just on race or not at race at all, but on their personality, on their contributions, along with their academic records, it isn't the case that Black people weren't admitted. They were. Now, maybe not in the same numbers as artificial, quotas would do, but that doesn't serve anyone anyway, because then you're basically admitting people who can't stay there because just based upon their race. So
well, I want to be clear.
Yeah.
Getting rid of affirmative action and racial preference submissions would lower the number of Black people admitted to Harvard. There's no doubt about that. The question is, why do they deserve to be admitted affirmatively with lower qualifications than an Asian student?
Right.
And my contention really is that you don't deserve to be admitted if you're objectively less qualified than another person. It doesn't matter what race you are, right? Because you're taking the spot of somebody who, you can say one reason or another. You're basically saying your race makes you oppressed, and then therefore to give you unmerited benefits for your race. And in order to do that, you have to take away the spot from someone who's more merited than you. And right. Just in the way that you justify that is by calling them an oppressor race. So Asians are now being viewed by Harvard as an oppressor or a privileged race. And that's unjustifiable. That really is unjustifiable in my end. Because we have to preserve this critical value where you judge people as an individual. You don't judge them as a member of a privileged or oppressed group, because you're going down a long and dark road there once you start to do that.
Oh, absolutely. And I also think that, putting aside the question of whether or not we should be judging people collectively based on their alleged oppression, the fact is that Asian Americans and Asian immigrants are just as oppressed, if you will, as any other immigrant group. You come to this country, my ancestors did as well. They come to this country with nothing oftentimes, and they work their way up, and they do it by values such as education and family values and hard work and developing social networks that can help people get up and lift up. And I think when you get rid of affirmative action, as you say, there will be perhaps less African Americans temporarily, but not as much less as one may think, because African Americans, just like everyone else, are able to develop the skills necessary to achieve. And that as a culture, we ought to encourage that amongst them, amongst all groups, instead of creating these artificial constructs which penalize achievement and success.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I mean, the Asian Americans have an image of being super good at taking tests. And, there's a lot of stereotypes around that, which I happen to know are completely false. That, as I heard you say to Tucker Carlson, test-taking robots, which is not really the case. I mean, it shows a stereotypical image that is everything that the liberal left claims that they're against.
Yeah, the stereotype of taking tests, also known as being prepared, right? I mean, you guess what? If you know that you're going to get tested for something, what do? You study for the test. Mm-hmm. And if you don't study for the test, that's your fault. That's not anybody else's fault. That's your fault. So yeah, Asians study for the test.
That's right. And look, we want to encourage success in this country as a society. It's people who study for tests are people who are able to achieve and concentrate and have a attention span, beyond MTV. It's sort of like you want to have that if we're going to build a great society here. There's a social reason why that's good, you would think. Mm-hmm. You advocate, you're talking about in your organization, Kenny, a colorblind society. That seems to contradict the present thinking of the critical race theory types who have superseded, frankly, the original view of the civil rights movement under the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., which was just that, a colorblind society. And it's moving more toward actually a return to placing qualities on people based on race that are somehow intrinsic, maybe even biological. I mean, it's in a way an old-fashioned 19th century colonialist version of racism that I think they're reintroducing. What do you think?
Colonialism, I think, is a correct way of describing it when you are trying to say that one group of people are the oppressed savage race that needs to be lifted up and colonized. If you were really thinking of that, and I mean, that's the kind of thinking that is being reestablished, except now it's the supposed colonized people that are advocating for their own colonization. This is crazy when you think about it, but I'll tell you how this came about, how this ideology, this critical race ideology came about.
Mm-hmm.
Harvard University was the first to create critical race theory. It started at Harvard Law School. It came from managerialism. It came from the idea that groups are easier to manage than people, easier to control. So if you can appeal to somebody's tribal group identity, you can control them. And that's exactly what's happening with critical race theory right now. You're appealing to a person's sense of group marginalization. And when you do, you can control them. You can get them to do stuff. Forget what they're teaching young minorities about themselves, which is that their race is perceived as inferior in this country, which I don't know how that's going to help a young minority kid get ahead. Mm-hmm. But think about what they're teaching white people now, that they are the oppressor race, that they're racist, even though they're not racist.
Right.
And think about the kind of guilt. What you're trying to do, you're trying to destroy somebody's ego. You're trying to make them feel guilty about themselves. Why? So you can control them. And so this is what critical race theory does. It controls by categorizing, and it controls by destroying somebody's own sense of self-control and self-confidence.
I mean, I think that it goes back further than Harvard Law School with Duncan Kennedy and with legal race theorists, and also Professor Charles Pierce, who was the first one to start with the micromanaged or the microaggression theory. It actually goes back to the critical theory of the Frankfurt School at Columbia, which was predominantly made up of German Jewish emigres from Nazi Germany who left in the 1930s and who were communists or who were socialists in the broader sense, and who developed this theory as a way to analyze American society and put people into different categories. Theodore Adorno was one of the major thinkers in that, and he wrote a book in the 1950s where he surmised his theory, and he was a sociologist, that all Americans are fascists secretly. We don't know this, it's subconscious, but the middle class is fascist, and that we have to basically upend and overthrow our entire society in order to get over that, which of course is the communist idea. So, you point out that they create these divisions among us, and this idea that one group, the dialectic that one group is oppressing another group, which leads not only to guilt on the part of the group that allegedly is doing the oppressing, but also to resentment amongst the group that's being oppressed, putting aside the fact that in this country of ours, people have great opportunity regardless of their group. In a way, you develop a victim mentality and an oppressor mentality, and it's very destructive because it's warped and because it's untrue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, this is expressly true. I mean, think about what the left has done to damage a person's a willingness to assimilate and trust in society. Think about, just to give you a controversial example. Think about what the government and media elites perpetuating systemic racism narrative upon Black Americans today that cause them to mistrust government vaccines, right? As a result, right now, we have more Black Americans who are unvaccinated than the rest of as a proportion of their population than other races right now. And part of that reason, if you actually talk to ordinary Black Americans, a lot of their skepticism comes from their skepticism of the idea that the government could use these vaccines for medical experimentation on them, everything like that. They talk about the Tuskegee study. And I get it. All of that is a brutal history right now. But teaching that right now forcing people to fixate that on that now as a present condition of their humanity diminishes their trust in the government. So you see that the progressive narrative of systemic racism is just coming to bite them in the back with regards to when the government actually wants to get things done.
Right, right. And I also think that playing a role in that was this irrational and in-choate hatred for President Donald Trump, that this was Trump's vaccine. And you had people like the Reverend Al Sharpton go out and compare it to Tuskegee and don't take it, don't trust Trump. So people got that message. And now that Trump's gone, they're trying to do a reverse and claim that they own the vaccines. But, right, I mean, but it's a little bit late because they already started all of that. And now we have all these videos of like Kamala Harris and Biden himself and everyone else saying, I'm not taking the vaccine because we don't trust it, it's Trump. So, this is, I guess that now they're trying to do the reversing, doing like an about face on that one. Asian Americans, I think also one of the reasons why there is this kind of discrimination, and this is just a sense, I have no empirical evidence to back this up, but I get the sense that Asian Americans are a little bit to the right of center politically. They're a little bit more conservative, and they adhere to very strong family values. They honor education, they honor individual rights. A lot of them got out of communist China, which makes them anti-communists. And I think that might be part of this agenda of trying to contain Asian success. What do you think?
Yes, but at the same time, lefty Asian Americans are the most lefty of them all, right?
Well,
because you have to, in my book, An Inconvenient Minority, I talk with some of these college, Ivy League educated Asian Americans who feel so painfully guilty about their success that it's honestly, it's honestly saddening to see somebody feel so guilty over the fact that they work hard. You have these Asian Americans in Harvard, Columbia University, who I talked to. One of them's name's Eileen. She asserts that anti-Blackness is baked into Asian Americans' blood. It's baked into her Chinese American community. And her evidence, she talks about a few isolated racist incidents for, her grandma maybe talking about, stay away from a Black person on the street. I'm not denying that. I'm not denying that some Asian Americans are racist against Black people, but there's some Black people who are racist against Asian Americans. And guess what? There's some white people who are racist against Black people, and there's some Black people who are racist against white people. And so to try to paint a narrative where you feel guilty for your success this is what Asian American leftists are doing to the imagination of the Asian American community. They're trying to paint them as guilty because they work hard. They're trying to say that they are white adjacent. They're participating in the privileges of white supremacy. And so, Asian
they work hard?
Generally, values-wise, they're more conservative. But in terms of a political outlook, the leftists are the leftiest of them all.
It's interesting. The same phenomena I think exists in my own Jewish community.
Right.
The left wing are the vanguard of the left, but much of the rank and file are more conservative. They're just quiet about it. I have people approach me and they say, Chuck, we're with you, but don't tell anybody. Because the left tends to control the high ground in Jewish culture. I don't know if that's quite true with Asian, but there is that element that you sense within them of extreme guilt that they've bought into. And in a way, I would argue, a certain level of self-hatred over their own life and success. And they isolate a few racist comments that might have been made by grandma back in the day and blow that up as if that's a context. There also is a problem, quite frankly, with Black racism against Asians. A lot of the crimes being committed against Asians, I think a high percentage of them are committed by Blacks. And young Black people are being told that to be successful, to be educated, is acting white. It's like that same thing as being this young woman that you interviewed at Harvard. For my being success, I'm acting white. Somehow I'm betraying my own race by being successful. I mean, think about how ridiculous and how wrong that is.
It's so wrong-headed. My own colleague, Christian, who is a spokesperson of Colorists United, talks about his own experience in high school collegiate debate, where he was making arguments that went against the grain, very intellectually, in his, primarily Black community. And as a result, he got shamed. People called him Uncle Tom. This is an ideology.
It is.
That bends every person, every ethnic group, every race completely out of shape. It preys on success, and it makes people feel guilty about their success, which is exactly the wrong way to go if you want to build a strong country.
Exactly. And, look, I've had some of that in my own community. I'll say, been shunned and been attacked. And, it's a communist agenda. If you have a couple of bullies who can get into an organization and take an extreme stand, most people want to avoid conflict, so they say nothing or they avoid it. And then their view takes over. And everyone else is basically essentially neutered, put in their place. And the answer to that is that conservatives and libertarians and people who don't agree have to come together and stand up to it. It's that simple. It's the only way to handle that kind of, I would suggest, intellectual and mental tyranny, which is what political correctness is. It drives out anyone that doesn't genuflect to their point of view, and it promotes and gives favors to people who do. That's how it works. It is an ideology of power, of earthly power.
It is a tyranny of the mind. I agree. It is trying to say you can't think what you want to think. You can't say what you want to say. You say what you want to say, you could be the punishment would be far greater than what you deserve. I believe in a meritocracy in all of these fronts, including speech. Speech is, funny enough, I believe that, if you say certain things, you should be punished, but the punishment should be equivalent to the level of which of the crime that you committed. You shouldn't get fired, expelled, and then tarred and feathered from your job and your entire reputation because you criticize affirmative action, as one Georgetown professor did. She said, hey, in my law school, unfortunately, I see a lot of, some of the Black Americans who go to Georgetown Law School who are admitted because of affirmative action tend to graduate at the lower end of the class. That's all she said. She got fired from her position, from her faculty position, just for saying that. And what she said, by the way, is true. It's factually true. You don't have to go too far into admissions data, longitudinal studies to reveal that people who are admitted preferentially, who lack the objective merit, tend to graduate in the bottom of the class. Is this not intuitive? So it's just admitting intuitive truths now has become politically incorrect to say. So it's very sad.
It is, and it shows as you say, the tyranny of the mind and the physical and literal tyranny that these people are able to wield now. All right, the book is An Inconvenient Minority, The Attack on Asian American Excellence and the Fight for Meritocracy. Kenny Sue is my guest. The book is available at Amazon Books. And Kenny, I want to ask you about, I think that partially some of the discrimination, and I'm going to be very blunt about this, against Asian Americans is the perception that there has been infiltration from communist China into the Asian American community. They're not a friend of the United States, and that they have societies on campuses, these Confucian societies, that are infiltrated by communist China and that force Chinese students to adhere to standards that they decide they must adhere to. Is there any truth to that?
Look, China is not a friend to the United States, and they definitely commit foreign influence in America. And we should weed those people out who are foreign actors in America. What we shouldn't do is we shouldn't racially profile, right? For somebody who was born in America, who was raised his entire life in America, somebody like me, somebody like my, most of my Asian American young person friends who were born and raised in this country, they obviously should be treated on the basis of their merits and not on the basis of their background.
Right. And it's also, it's a political situation that might be analogous to saying that Germans should be discriminated because of Hitler, during World War II, or Russians should be discriminated because of Stalin. It doesn't really equate. However, there are problems with that. I mean, I think that Communist China is trying to infiltrate American politics. I think that they might have infiltrated in terms of cyber war over the last election, a topic we can't get into because I'll get banned on YouTube. Right. I mean, and but I also had on an interesting. This is a while ago, a Chinese dissident who talked about the fact that Communist China today has Christianity growing like a wildfire, both Protestant and Catholic, and we're talking about huge growth, and that Communist China will fall because of this, in the same way that the Roman Empire fell because of the rise of Christianity. I mean, the Roman Empire was putting Christians into like, gladiators. I mean, they're putting them into lions' dens, until one day the Roman Emperor Constantine woke up and realized that his entire empire had become Christian, and he threw in the towel and was baptized. Do you think that is the future in China?
I hope so.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know, but it's hopeful in that this conflict, to my way of thinking, will work its way out, not because China will confront the West and the United States and the Asian Rim and of its other enemies, but because they'll collapse from within due to a growth in freedom and a growth in awareness of existence of God, and and all of the other things that are anathema to the communist elites who run the show by force of arms. I'm just asking. I know that, I don't know if you're into this issue.
I'm not a huge expert on China, but here, right. I mean, Christianity in China is growing hugely. There's some estimates having over 100 million people in China are Christian. House churches are being formed everywhere. Look, I mean, the religion of China, the state religion of China right now is money. It's the soul of China historically. Confucianism, that kind of thing, is being sapped by the Communist Party. And of course, what we've also seen is that Confucianism itself is not a religion that can really withstand that kind of thing, unfortunately, because it's not predicated on the values can withstand, but the belief is not necessarily withstandable. So I think Christianity coming into China is a great thing. It can really awaken the soul of the nation.
Yes, indeed. And I just want to also just kind of wrap up by saying that I think that one of the main causes of the anti-Asian attack by the liberal elites who run our academic institutions and perhaps elsewhere is based on at least an assumption that Chinese Americans, Asian Americans are moving to the right. Now, I know that you say that some of the leaders are far left. I get that. But I'm talking about the average rank and file. There is a growing movement of Asian Americans on the right. They're voting more on the right. They are, becoming more public. And this might be in reaction to Communist China partially, but it's also part of the culture. Do you think that, I mean, is that something that, am I on to something with that? Because I say the same thing, by the way, about Jews, although I think I give up hope on most Jews. I mean, we're way behind the eight ball. We're never going to, it's a marginal thing. I don't even pay attention. But I think with Asians, there is hope for this. I think it's the same thing true with Blacks and Hispanics, by the way.
Of course, there's hope for Asians. Of course,
I mean, in terms
we're
of
at a turning point. We're at a pivotal. Yeah. And Asians voted for President Trump in 2020 at the highest rate that they voted for a Republican since the first Bush. So this is like, I'm sorry, maybe the second Bush. But this is something that this is an issue that is turning Asian Americans towards the right, because they are seeing, hey, they all of this identity politics talk. Guess what? It sounds a lot like Mao Zedong, who divided people into privileged and oppressed classes and said the bourgeoisie will always fight the proletariat in an eternal battle, and all that did was destroy his country. So, yeah, I mean, we definitely don't want that to come in America. That's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it reminds me of conversations I've had with Russian immigrants who say that they came here expecting a free, independent people and culture, and they were hearing stuff that reminded them of Stalin. So, Kenny, let my listeners and viewers know where they can get your excellent book and about your organization and any websites you'd like to share.
Yeah, An Inconvenient Minority on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Walmart, Target, wherever books are sold. It's been huge. We sold out our first printing, and we're moving on to our second printing now. It's going to be great. Color Us United, colorusunited.org. Sign our petition for a race-blind America. We want to keep you updated. We have major efforts tackling institutional guerrilla warfare, the institutions that are trying to divide our country, like Harvard University, and like other institutions, including the Salvation Army. So tell us, that's what we can do.
Excellent. All right, Kenny, listen, thanks so much for joining me. Let's do it again. I mean, I really appreciate it. Interesting talk. Thank you.